Welcome to This Explainer. We're jumping right in today because we are unpacking something that is incredibly relatable and honestly probably a little validating for a lot of you. I want you to think for a second about a quiet realization you might have had recently. Have you noticed how, as the years go by, the idea of just staying at home, maybe just curling up on the couch, starts to feel vastly more appealing than getting all dressed up and going out? Well, if that resonates with you, you are absolutely not alone. Today, we are diving deep into the fascinating science behind our shrinking social circles.
So, picture this. A message pops up on your phone. Someone is inviting you to a party, maybe a big gathering, or even just a casual meetup in town. Now, if you think back to maybe a few years ago, that invitation might have instantly sparked a real sense of excitement, right? You'd have been the very first one to RSVP yes. But now, your first instinct is almost always, yeah, maybe next time. You might even feel this tiny wave of relief when plans inevitably get canceled. Your weekends are just noticeably quieter. But here's the thing we really need to understand. That disappearing social circle isn't a failure. It is actually a really fascinating mystery of human behavior.
And right off the bat, here's a crucial realization. It's not that you suddenly dislike people. It's not that you're unhappy with your life. And it is definitely not that you've suddenly become antisocial. Actually, scratch that. It's something much more subtle. It's this quiet, gradual psychological shift that happens so slowly, most of us don't even notice it while we're right in the middle of it. Our brains are literally reorganizing how we process social reward. So why exactly does this happen? Is it a sign of personal growth, or is there something much deeper going on under the surface?
To really get this, we have to look at the anatomy of how friendships fade. And I'm not talking about the dramatic blow-ups, the big arguments or the betrayals. I'm talking about the quiet departures. The process is just incredibly subtle. First, the conversations just become a little less frequent. A phone call turns into a text. Then those text messages start getting shorter. A heartfelt, "How are you doing?" turns into a quick thumbs-up reaction. Finally, life just gets busy, and without any formal goodbye whatsoever, the connection simply disappears. For a lot of us, this natural drifting away feels strangely inevitable.
Well, psychology tells us this drifting isn't random at all. Psychologists actually call this process social pruning. Think of it exactly like being a master gardener. A gardener intentionally trims away the unnecessary, overgrown branches so that the core plant can actually grow stronger and healthier. We do the exact same thing with our social lives. We naturally begin reducing the sheer volume of our connections just to manage our cognitive load. It allows us to invest our highly limited time and emotional energy much more carefully. We aren't being mean. We're just starting to value depth way more than quantity.
This whole behavior is beautifully explained by one of psychology's most influential concepts, socio-emotional selectivity theory. When we're young, life feels like it stretches endlessly into the future. Because time feels infinite, we say yes to everything. We want new experiences, we chase novelty, and we aggressively build our social world. But as we age, this profound shift happens, and it's actually a subconscious survival mechanism. We become keenly aware that our time, our energy, and our attention are strictly limited resources. Because we perceive our future time as finite, our overarching goals naturally shift away from chasing the new and shiny and move firmly towards seeking true emotional meaning.
Basically, when we're younger, we focus heavily on expanding our world and collecting relationships. We judge our social success by asking ourselves, how many people do I know? We want this massive network. But as we mature, we transition into cultivating relationships. We stop asking how many people we know, and we start asking who truly matters. Our brains actually start prioritizing the calming oxytocin of deep, secure bonds over those quick dopamine hits of new encounters. It's a complete pivot from expansion to deep connection. And honestly, in many ways, this is an incredibly healthy, natural evolution.
But we do have to pause here. There's an absolutely vital question we need to ask ourselves as we look at our own changing habits. What if this withdrawal isn't entirely about wisdom? What if, instead, it's a defense mechanism? You see, sometimes we simplify our lives because we've gained the wisdom to know what's actually worth investing in. We are comfortably settling into ourselves. But other times, we pull away simply because we are totally exhausted, we're disappointed, or we've been deeply hurt by the people around us.
The tricky part is that from the outside looking in, the result looks exactly the same. You have a smaller social circle. You spend way more time alone. You accept fewer invitations. But internally, the psychological motivations are miles apart. One path is driven by clarity and wisdom. I know what matters most, and I'm investing my energy there. The other path is driven purely by fear.
I don't want to get hurt again, so I'm just going to shut everyone out. Recognizing that tension between clarity and fear in your own life is absolutely vital for your long-term health.
So, the crucial takeaway is that while healthy social pruning improves our well-being, fear-driven isolation is genuinely dangerous. Human connection isn't just a luxury, it is a biological necessity. Research consistently shows that chronic, persistent loneliness carries massive physiological consequences. Long-term social isolation keeps your nervous system locked in a state of high alert, and it's directly linked to increased stress, cardiovascular problems, cognitive decline, and a severe drop in overall well-being. In fact, studies suggest that persistent loneliness can literally be just as harmful to your body as other major physical health risks. We simply cannot afford to accidentally build a fortress around ourselves out of fear.
Okay, so if human connection is a biological necessity, but we still really need to protect our limited energy, how on earth do we strike the right balance? Well, to be selectively social in a genuinely healthy way, we need to do it thoughtfully. We have to understand not just why we are pulling back, but specifically who we are pulling back from. We need to pinpoint the specific, draining behaviors that force us to retreat in the first place. That way, we can prune intentionally rather than just isolating completely from the world.
And this brings us to a really fascinating area of psychology known as the dark triad. Now, we aren't using this to label the people in our lives as comic book villains. Instead, this is a highly useful framework psychologists use to describe 3 specific personality traits that make relationships incredibly challenging. These traits, narcissism, Machiavellianism, and psychopathy, they all exist on a spectrum. And when these characteristics become a person's dominant pattern of behavior, it completely validates exactly why you felt the desperate need to prune them from your life.
When we break down these exhausting patterns, the interpersonal dynamics become remarkably clear. Take narcissism. Its core driver is an endless, absolute need for validation. This creates a deeply exhausting dynamic where every single conversation revolves entirely around them, leaving you feeling basically invisible. Then there is Machiavellianism, which is driven by a constant desire for control. These relationships are highly transactional. They're always asking, what can I gain from this? And they rely heavily on manipulation and guilt. Finally, psychopathy. The core driver here is a reduced capacity for empathy. The dynamic feels strangely cold, one-sided, and completely lacking in any real emotional weight. Dealing with any of these traits rapidly depletes your emotional reserves.
Now, understanding those draining traits isn't about diagnosing every single person you meet. It's about recognizing patterns that harm your well-being so you can steer clear of them. Because the healthiest path is always balance. We absolutely do not want to isolate ourselves entirely from the world out of fear, but we also do not want to surround ourselves with relationships that constantly deplete us. The ultimate goal here is to honestly reflect, pay close attention to the reciprocal relationships that genuinely energize you, and confidently step away from the ones that leave you feeling used.
When researchers study happiness and psychological fulfillment, they consistently arrive at one profound conclusion. A meaningful life isn't built on having hundreds of connections, it's built on a handful of authentic ones. It's about finding the people who know the real you, the people you can be completely unguarded around, who energize you, and who remain standing by your side when all the chaotic noise of the world finally fades away. That is the ultimate goal of healthy social pruning. So, if you've recently found yourself backing away from that endless social race, take comfort. Don't assume something is broken. You are very likely just learning the profound difference between merely being surrounded by people and being genuinely connected to them. But as you navigate this shift in your own life, I want to leave you with one final essential thought to chew on today. Are you carefully curating your social world to let the right light in, or are you quietly building impenetrable walls around it?